All right, it's great to be with you guys tonight after a long day. Some of you guys are looking rather tan. Some of you are just rednecks. I can say that. I'm from Oklahoma. So, all right. Tonight we're going to focus our attention on Peter. Peter is one of Jesus' first followers, and his story is a fascinating story. If you read about him, you really find him all throughout the New Testament. He's in the four Gospels, the four biographies about the life of Jesus. The book of Acts follows him. Some of the letters that Paul writes include references or things about Peter. He wrote 2 of the books that are included in the New Testament. So he's really all throughout the entire New Testament part of the book. But he is a very fascinating character. He's a blue-collar guy. He worked with his hands. He was a fisherman. He was a man's man. At one point, we're told that he was uneducated and ordinary, which means that he wasn't very smart and wasn't very impressive, and he probably wouldn't have gone to college, okay? So that's probably like the category he would have fallen into. Okay, good. You know, you never know when somebody walks on stage when you're up there, like, what are they doing on stage next to you, you know? Anyways, so he was rough around the edges. He was the guy where if something needed to be said, he said it. If something needed to be done, he did it. He was the buddy who would jump into the fight to defend you, only later to ask why you were fighting in the first place. He was that kind of guy. And there's something said about Peter, something Jesus says to him at the beginning of Jesus' time with him, and it's also said in their last interaction before Jesus goes back up to heaven, and it really creates the bookends of his life, I think, and the valuable lesson that we can learn from him. So let me read the first thing Jesus says to him, Matthew 4:19. We read this, "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." And then in the last private conversation before Jesus returned to heaven, Jesus' last words to Peter are, "You must follow me." And so Peter, I think, is just a great example of what a follower is. And for you and me, it kind of sets the stage of what are going to be the themes ahead for us as we follow Jesus throughout the course of our life. And I want to define the word Christian, and I think this is helpful sometimes, especially being in the country that we live in. A lot of times people throw around the word Christian, but we don't really know what it means. And the word Christian, it's a combination of 2 words, combination of the word Christ and the word follower. So if you say you're a Christian, you are saying, I have a leader that I follow, and his name is Christ. That's why sometimes when we're communicating, it's actually more helpful to just say Christ follower, because it kind of describes more what it is we're talking about. But as we call ourselves Christians, Christ followers, one of the things that I find helpful about that is it implies some realities about my life. I am a follower. I am not the leader. So what are some things that we know about followers? Well, followers need a leader. Followers don't always know where they need to go. A lot of times followers don't want to go where they're told to go. That's why they need to follow. That's why they need a leader. What do we know about leaders? Well, a leader's task is getting you from point A to point B. That's their task. And they're leading often a group of people who don't know they need to go from point A to point B. A lot of times the group is really comfortable at point A, but they really need to go to point B. And so the leader's got to get them there. So not only do they need to not know they need to go to point B, but then when they're told they need to go to point B, a lot of followers are like, but I really like point A. I don't want to go to point B. But in this situation, are we the leaders? No, we're the followers. So the theme of our life, again and again and again, is God taking us where we've never been, and oftentimes where at first blush, we don't want to go. But again, the theme of our life is we're going to be followers. That's the term that we use to describe ourselves. We call ourselves Christians. We're Christ followers. We have a leader who's taking us somewhere that we need to go. So let's look at Peter's life. Let's see what's involved in following Christ as we unpack it from Peter's story. The first thing we learn is this, As you follow Christ, you've got to step out of your comfort zone. Okay, this is a big thing. As you follow Christ again and again, you are going to have to step out of your comfort zone. Now, one of the stories that Peter is well known for is a story where Peter walks on the water. And it's a fascinating story. It happens late at night. It's kind of in the middle of the night. They had had a long day doing ministry things. Right before this happened, you have the scene where Jesus feeds the thousands of people on the hillside. You have this amazing display, this miracle. And then Jesus wants some alone time. So he says to the disciples, he says, hey, you guys cross over the lake. I'll meet you on the other side, but I'm going to take some alone time. So they head out. And they get stuck in this storm on the lake in the middle of the night. It's a huge lake that they're on. They're trying to cross to the other side. And not only are they not making progress, they're like stuck and they can't move forward, but their whole focus goes from getting to the other side to, we just have to stay afloat. Like, this storm's going to knock us over. We just have to stay afloat. And not all the men in the boat, but a lot of the men are seasoned fishermen. So they know what they're doing. Like, they know how to operate a boat. They know how to be out there on the water. They know what they're doing. And they're really struggling in this situation. And then in the middle of this storm where they're just trying to stay afloat, one of them's like, oh my goodness, I think I see something that looks like somebody walking on the water. And they all look and they realize, oh, there's somebody walking on the water. There's something out there defying gravity and physics. It's walking on the water. So their reaction is, it's a ghost. I mean, it's probably what our reaction would be. I mean, it's like you're tired, you're stressed, you're trying to hold on for your life, and you see this, thing that doesn't follow the laws of nature, and you're like, oh my gosh, So they're freaking out on the boat. It turns out to be Jesus. Jesus identifies himself. He says, hey guys, calm down. I'm not a ghost. It's me. I'm just out for an evening stroll on the water, cruising across the lake. And then we read this, really fascinating. Matthew 14:28, Peter is speaking. He says, Lord. Jesus has just identified himself. Lord, if it's you, Peter replied, tell me to come to you on the water. Now, I think this is really amazing because Peter, he's a skilled fisherman. He grew up on the water. One of the cool things about living in Huntington is how many people work around the water. A lot of people, they're longshoremen. They work in Long Beach. They work on the docks. They work on ships. Some of them are ship captains. Like, they live out on the water. And one of the things about guys that are in this industry is a lot of them know people where it's gone really bad. So my guess with Peter, he probably knows people who've drowned in the water. And it's the middle of the night. It's not like today. I mean, going overboard in a ship at night, if you've ever been out like on the water in a storm, you know that it's dangerous in the day or at night, but especially it's night, it's perilous. But we have like these fancy life vests that have reflectors and they've got strobes on them, and we got the Coast Guard with helicopters and they can come and find you, and spotlights. They didn't have any of that stuff. So for Peter, he knows if he gets out of the boat, it's really, it could be the end. I mean, he knows like the safest place is in the boat. You don't get out of the boat, especially at night. If you get out of the boat at night, you're lost. But Peter sees, well, Jesus is walking on the water and he's my Lord, he's my God. I want to be where he is too. I want to join him. I want to be doing the same thing he's doing. So he actually asks, he says like, hey, tell me to come to you on the water. I think that's amazing faith on his part. The very next verse 29, Jesus says this. He says, come, he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat. He steps out of his comfort zone, the safe place, into this unknown world of walking on the water, and he walks on the water and came toward Jesus. Now, we're not told how long he's walking on the water. We don't know how far away Jesus was. Like, was he as far of the stage to the back of the room? Like, I don't know how far he was. We don't know how many steps Peter took. We have no idea. But I just imagine, like think about this with me. What would it have been like to walk on the water with Jesus? Like, how amazing would that have been? He's defying like the laws of nature. He's defying it by walking on the water. This is phenomenal. Do we have any surfers in the room? Anybody? Okay, we got a couple, yeah. Like when I started surfing, at first it's just this painful, embarrassing, exhausting thing. And then you think you've actually surfed and then you see the video and you're like, oh no, that wasn't surfing. Like, don't show anybody the video, delete the video. But then you really surf, you really catch like a proper wave. You're on the open face, you're doing what you want to do. Man, like I'll tell you, it is an unmatched feeling. It's insane. It feels so good. My guess is what Peter's experiencing walking on the water is way better than anything any surfer has ever experienced. I mean, this is amazing. How many people in history can say that they walked on the water? This is amazing. Verse 30. So he's walking on the water. We don't know how long it's taking, how many steps he takes. Verse 30, read this. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, Lord, save me. Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. You have little faith, he said. Why did you doubt? So he's walking, he's taking steps, he takes his eyes off Jesus, starts to look at the circumstances, sees everything around him, and then when he takes his eyes off Jesus, he starts to sink. I don't want you to focus on the fact that he started to sink. I want you to see the two very, very kind things that Jesus does in response. First thing, he calls out for help, and what Jesus does is Jesus comes, he reaches down, he grabs him, and he saves him. That was so kind of Jesus to do that for him, to save him and pull him back up. But then Jesus leans in and he says something, and I don't want you to miss this. He says, you have little faith. He said, why did you doubt? Now, I do not think that's supposed to be read like a rebuke. I think that is a very kind, loving statement of Jesus to point out an area where Peter needed to grow. And for Peter, he needed to grow in faith. And so Jesus leaned in, said, hey, Peter, we got to work on your faith. Next time we do this, keep your eyes on me. You'll stay walking. I think that's what Jesus is doing. And he doesn't do this for the public of the other disciples. You know, they're in the boat, these 11 other guys. Jesus doesn't like reach down and pull him up and then walk over to the boat and guys, hey guys, Peter over here, little faith, like what a joke, you know? Can you believe him? Like this isn't mocking. He's not making fun of him. He's not being mean to him. You know, the reason this is recorded is because in God's plan, he decided this would be in the Bible. But my guess is Peter told this story to Matthew, and Matthew was like, that's amazing, I'm going to write it down. Peter was the only person in that moment that heard Jesus say this. So this was just for Peter. And Peter just got another way that he can grow. Now, why did Peter get all this? Because he got out of the boat. He got out of the boat. He got the experience of walking on water. He gets to experience God's power in a way that nobody else did. And he has Jesus identify for him a next step that he could take in his growth. The only reason he got that is because he got out of his comfort zone and he got out of the boat. Now, what's interesting is think about the 11 other guys in the boat. You know, they're all his disciples, his 11 closest followers. They all see the same thing. They see him walking on the water. They think he's a ghost. You know, but only Peter's the one that says, hey, can I join you on the water? Peter's the only one that did that. So they get to witness this. They're witnesses to it. You know, their faith probably grew as a result of that, but they didn't get to experience it. And they didn't have Jesus help identify a specific area where they could grow. Yeah, they get to see it, but they didn't benefit like Peter did. Why? Peter got out of the boat. He stepped out of his comfort zone. For you and me, again and again and again, if we want to grow as we're following Jesus, we have to step out of the comfort zone. If we don't step out of the boat and get out of the comfort zone, the simple fact is we just miss out on growth. We miss out on the opportunity to grow. And one other thing I want to point out right here in this conversation between Jesus and Peter is Peter, he didn't get out of the boat until Jesus told him to. You know, verse 29, Jesus says, come. Peter doesn't just see Jesus and then just like huck himself out of the boat. No, he's like, hey, like, if this is you, tell me to come to you on the water. And then Jesus says, okay, come. And I think that's so important because when it comes to getting out of the boat, you do want to hear from God. You don't want to just at random be like, you know, I'm going to close my eyes and jump. Like, I don't think that's smart at all. You need to hear from God. So Neil talked about this. Your leaders are massive proponents of this. I'm going to encourage you to do it. I think a quiet time or a daily time with God is a non-negotiable when it comes to hearing from God. I mean, you're not going to find a verse that says, okay, 15, 30 minutes a day, you've got to sit down and you've got to journal through a passage. You're not going to find a verse that says that. But what a great opportunity to sit down with God and read the Bible so that you can hear from him on a daily basis. And in my story, again and again, God has used that practice to speak to me and identify areas where I've got to get out of my comfort zone. You know, so for me, it was Allie and I, we were dating, And in our dating relationship, before we got engaged and then married, it was a on-again, off-again relationship. So it was, we dated, we broke up, we were mean to each other, we dated, we broke up, we were awkward and passive-aggressive with each other, and then finally we dated, and then we got engaged and then married really quickly, And then we got kids right away because I was like, we got to seal this deal, you know what I mean? But, so one of those times where we were dating and then we broke up, it was right around Christmas, and it was, and you guys know what this is like. You got the same friend group, so then it makes it like doubly awkward, okay? So we've got the same friend group, and one of my buddies is like, hey, like it's Christmas time, and you USC guys, you guys can speak to this. I don't know if they still do this. In Santa Monica, they used to do an outdoor ice skating rink at Christmas time every year. Do they still do that in Santa Monica? Okay, so they've got that rink up there. So one of my buddies is like, hey, like let's get a group. It's Christmas time. Go to Santa Monica. We'll ice skate. Do you want to go? And he asks me, and my first question is what any like hurt ex-boyfriend asks was, is Allie going? He's like, yeah, she already committed to go. She's going to be there. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going. So I'm like, I'm not going. I don't want to go. I don't want to be a part of it. It's just awkward. It's weird. It's uncomfortable. I don't want to do that. So the day of the ice skating thing rolls around, and I'm doing my quiet time. And I'm in 1 Peter. I still remember what I was studying. I was studying a passage that talks about your love needs to be sincere. And I'm studying this passage, and part of my quiet time is just annoyed at the situation. I'm just like frustrated, like, oh man, like all these people are going and having fun, and she's having fun, and she's probably gonna meet a guy, and blah, blah, blah. And I'm just like running through this. I'm like, God, what's going on here? And so I'm doing my quiet time, and it was very subtle. It was not an audible voice. It was just that idea of sincere love really stood out. And it was like, I kind of sensed in the moment, God was kind of saying like, Elliot, you're just not very good at that. You're not good at just really loving people. Like you kind of love them based on the circumstances, if it's advantageous or you feel good about it. But when you're not feeling good or when you're kind of not liking the way life's going, you're just not that great at love. So you know what? This ice skating thing might be a great opportunity for you to grow in some love. And I was sitting there, I was like, that is the last thing I wanted to get out of my quiet time today. Like, I did not want God to be like, you know what, you need to go, not to try to be in a relationship with her, but just because there's a lot of people there and you need to learn how to love them, even though you're wrapped up in emotional turmoil. I really didn't like that. I was like, you know what? I think God's right. I'm going to go. So I went, and guess what? Nothing happened between me and Allie. It wasn't like, this like fairy tale moment occurred. I mean, it was just there were awkward moments, there were very uncomfortable moments, but it was an opportunity for me to get out of my comfort zone and go grow in the area of love. The only way I knew how to do that was because I took the time to hear from God in the morning, and he was like, Elliot, this is a growth edge for you. You got to take this step. So if you want to get out of the boat, you really need to learn how to hear from God so you're getting out of the boat in the ways that he wants you to get out of your comfort zone. Another thing we see in Peter's example is you got to be teachable. This is so important. You have to be teachable. And one of the things you'll find in the Bible as God leads is sometimes his leading, there's words that are used. That says that he disciplines us, he trains us, he instructs us. And so one of the ways he leads us could be compared to how a sports coach coaches us. Now, that's not the full picture of what God does, but I do think one helpful way to think about God is God will lead us how a sports coach does. So he'll push us, he'll give us instruction, he'll train us, he'll give us correction. And God will do this through the flow of our entire lives. And you see this in Peter's story. But as I think about this for me, I think about the best sports coach I ever had was a high school basketball coach. And I had him my sophomore year, and he was hard. He was so hard, and he was on us all the time. And I'd come home from practice discouraged and upset, and I remember going to my dad, and I was like, Dad, like, man, the coach is just, he's on me today, and like he's yelling at me, and he's making me run extra stuff and all this stuff. And I was upset, and my dad was like, he gave me some perspective. He's like, you should actually be glad he's pushing you that hard because it means that he notices you and he sees potential in you. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And it turned out my dad was right, because what the coach was trying to do, he was trying to take us as a team and as players somewhere we had never been. He was trying to we were really honestly like a mediocre high school team, but he saw like, hey, like these guys have championship potential, and I think I can get them there. And so he was pushing us for that. He wasn't going to let us settle. So there were habits that we had to stop. There was fitness we had to achieve. We'd never been in a level of shape like he was going to get us in. There was strength that we had to acquire. There were skills we had to develop. There was selfishness that we had to kill and an ability to team together that we had to learn how to do. And the only way to get us there was to push us and to drive us. And if we weren't teachable in those situations, we never would have advanced. We never would have grown. We never would have benefited from him pushing us. And as you read through Peter's story, what you find is Peter needed the exact same thing. You know, there's times in his story where he's clearly confused about what's happening and he needs to be corrected. There's other times that his thinking is just flat out wrong and unhelpful. And there's times where he takes action. He's quick to jump into action, but his action could be detrimental to the goal. And so what does he need? He needs ongoing instruction, even at times really hard to hear rebukes. But because Peter's teachable, he stays on the path. Let me just give you a couple of the examples. There was one time where Jesus is telling the disciples, he's giving them a glimpse of what's ahead. Very kind thing of Jesus to do. He's saying, hey guys, I'm going to go to Jerusalem. I'm going to suffer many things, and then I'm going to die at the hands of the Jews. This is what's going to happen in Jerusalem. Then I'm going to rise after 3 days. And Peter hears this, and this is so foreign to Peter's idea of what's going to happen. Like Peter thinks, hey, Jesus is here, God in flesh. He's the Messiah. He's the King. We're going to take the kingdom. Like, let's go. Like this idea of a crucified Savior is not on his mind. So Peter, probably the only disciple willing to correct Jesus, pulls Jesus aside, and we read this in Matthew 16. Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. Peter's rebuking Jesus. Never, Lord, he said, this shall never happen to you. Jesus turned and said to Peter, get behind me, Satan. You're a stumbling block to me. You do not have in mind the concerns of God, but merely human concerns. So he thinks he's doing a kind thing. He's pulling Jesus aside and said, no, there's no way this is going to happen. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. Saying, hey, Satan put that thought in your mind and you believed it. No, we're not doing that. And this is a very, very strong rebuke from Jesus to Peter. You see the same thing with Paul. Paul does the same thing to Peter. There's another time Peter has given in to fear of what people will think of him. Because of the fear of man, he changes his behavior and modifies it to fit the situation, and it becomes a bad testimony for other people. And so Paul, and if you know Paul's story, Paul starts out as a killer of Christians. He rounds up Christians and he would kill them. He would oversee their imprisonment and their execution. So he's a persecutor of the church. Then he becomes a Christian and actually has to go to Peter for input on how to follow God and how to live as a Christian. So he's really a junior to Peter, Paul is. But because Peter, his behavior has gotten off track, in Galatians 2:11, this is what Paul writes. He says about Peter, he says, I opposed him to his face because he stood condemned. So here's Paul, a junior to Peter, publicly correcting Peter. You know, it's one thing for Peter to get corrected by Jesus, and that's God in flesh. I mean, if any of us get corrected by Jesus, if he's physically here and he corrects us, we're like, got it. But somebody who you view as inferior to you, correcting you, and you're open to that correction, to be teachable, that's amazing. That really is amazing. And because Peter is teachable, he doesn't reject the instruction. He doesn't make excuses. He doesn't say they have no idea what they're talking about. He doesn't resist the instruction. He doesn't become hard-hearted. He doesn't isolate himself. He doesn't push other people away. Instead, he learns from it, and guess what? He benefits. He keeps moving forward as a follower because he's teachable. You know, one of the things I think is really interesting in his timeline, the story of him walking on water and getting corrected by Jesus, and then the story of Paul opposing him to his face, it's a 20-year gap between those two things. One happens when he's really middle-aged, and one happens towards the end of his life. The implication for us is you and I need to be teachable right up till the moment we die, okay? We're never gonna outgrow the need to be teachable, to be open to instruction. And we see that displayed in Peter's life. The third thing is this. You gotta keep moving. This is such an impressive thing by Peter. As a follower, he keeps moving. And he had so many opportunities to stop. So many opportunities to give up and quit and walk away. I mean, he could have thought when he jumped out of the boat and tried to walk on water, he could have thought, man, how embarrassing. I started to sink in front of all my friends. Now I'm the joke of the group. There goes Peter. How embarrassing. I'm not going to do this anymore. He could have said, hey, I just was trying to help Jesus out. I mean, he said they were going to kill him. And I was like, no way, we're not going to do that. Now he's telling me Satan's putting thoughts in my head. Whoa, dude, chill, bro. Like, you don't need to come at me like that. What's going on with you? I can't figure this out. I'm not going to do this anymore. He could have walked away. We didn't mention the story where at the night that Jesus is arrested, they come and arrest him in the garden. And Peter's like, dude, it's the moment we're starting the revolution. And he's like, I've been packing a heat this whole time, whips the sword out and starts swinging. And it's like, you think about it. It's like in the story, he cuts the guy's ear off. He wasn't aiming for the ear. Okay. Like he was trying to kill the guy. So he's like, Jesus, I thought this was the moment that we were going for it. I've been ready, And then how embarrassing. Think about this. He's corrected in front of the enemy. And then his Lord, his master, picks the ear up and puts it back. He's like, Peter. Like, it's like, talk about embarrassing. And it's just like, the guy had so many opportunities to quit, to walk away. Then obviously there's the most famous failure. When he denies Jesus 3 times, Jesus even says, you're going to deny me 3 times. He says, I'll die for you. No, you won't. You'll deny me 3 times. And then he does it. And after he does, we're told that he weeps bitterly. I mean, he is just hit with so much guilt and shame at what he did. He's weeping. I mean, again, the guy, you read the story and it's like over and over and over again. He could have just said, I can't figure it out. I can't get it right. I don't know what's going on. I'm confused. I thought we were going one way and now we're going another way. I thought I was helping and then I found out I was hurting. I cannot get this right. But you know what? He doesn't quit. He never quits. He keeps moving. And as followers, that is what we do. We don't give up. We keep following. Our whole life, we keep moving forward. I think one of the challenges you and I face is when we think about life, I think we think of it like we think of a photo album. Photo albums work. I mean, we really don't have those anymore. I mean, it's like maybe if you go to your grandma's house, she has a photo album, but they're fun to flip through. And it's just a series of pages of pictures. And the pictures are all like a snapshot of a moment in time. And so we think of our life and we think of how we're doing, and we really think of like snapshots. And it's kind of like, okay, like if there's more good than bad snapshots, then we must be headed in the right direction. And if there's more bad than good, then, maybe something's wrong. And so that's kind of how we look at it. We look at these snapshots, but the problem with pictures is they don't tell the whole story. They might tell the story at the millisecond when the button on the camera was clicked, but they really don't tell the story of the trajectory of a person's life. So I think when God looks at me and you, he doesn't look at snapshots of our life. I think it's more accurate to think of it like a camera is rolling, and it's like a movie that's unfolding. And there's a word that's used in the Bible that is used to describe what success is. And the word translates to push forward. So if you want to know what success is, according to the Bible, success is to just keep pushing forward, to keep moving, to not give up, to not quit, to not give in. If you look at the snapshots, oh man, there are so many snapshots that are, they could give you a reason to quit. I think of my own life. There are so many snapshots where if I just look at those, it's like, there is no reason to move forward. But that's not how God looks at it. God looks at it moment by moment, and his question is, what are they going to do now? I know that just happened, but what are you going to do now? How are you going to keep making progress? How are you going to keep pushing forward? And Peter is an example of someone, he could have quit so many times, but he kept making progress. And because he kept making progress, guess what he got to do? He got to know God better and better and better and better. Same thing for you and me. Following Jesus, it is a lifelong endeavor. If you really want to get to know God, we're talking about knowing God. You can get to know about God, by reading a book or coming to a conference. if you really want to know God, you know what it's going to take? It's going to take your whole life, all the way to the end. Keep moving forward. Don't stop. Don't give up. Keep pushing. So as a follower, I think the themes of your life are going to be the same as the themes of Peter. You're going to have to get out of your comfort zone. You're going to have to step on the boat and trust Jesus. And to do that, you really need to hear him speak. And then you got to be teachable. You know, I don't know if you've heard it said, teachability is the only shortcut in life. The only way to get ahead is to be teachable. It's the only way. And then you just have to keep moving forward. You can't stop. You got to keep moving forward. And trust me, there will be so many opportunities to stop. But God's going to continuously be asking, so what are you going to do now? So I'm going to wrap up. And that's really my encouragement, guys. You got to keep moving. In some ways, this is really only the beginning. You guys, like, I'm 40. I don't even know how old Neil is. Neil's like 70. You guys, right? Yeah, you guys are just starting. You're just starting. You're just starting. You're just starting. Okay, literally, I want you to say that. I'm just starting. Like, say that right now. I'm just starting. That's right. I'm just starting. Okay? Hey, you have to keep moving. Okay? All right. I'm going to wrap up and pray. Father God, man, I thank you for people like Peter. And I thank you for the examples of people that were not perfect. They were not amazing on the surface. They were called ordinary and uneducated. And yet they kept following you. God, I thank you for that. And I pray that every single one of us would be like that, God. There are going to be so many opportunities to get distracted, to give up, to get into other things. Father, please help us keep going. In Jesus' name, amen.